I'm Trevor from Polymath, but I'm going to tell a quick story. Once upon a time, in a hot summer boardroom in Bridgetown, Barbados, in 2017, 2 years ago, Polymath had a major decision in front of us. Back then, we were just a small team of developers and early contributors, and we didn't have much in common except for one thing, and that was the belief, the conviction that security tokens would come to disrupt the financial world as we know it. So we did what any good group of hackers should do, and we sacrificed the rest of our summer and started building. Progress was swift. We emerged a product roadmap pretty quickly, but there was one critical decision left in front of us, and this was one of those decisions that you can't undo. It was like one of those committal decisions, so we agonized over this for quite some time. And that decision was, should we build a security token blockchain? Should we build a foundation to the new security token stack? That was the question. And it was a tempting idea, a huge opportunity, one of the most ambitious things you could ever possibly imagine, rebuilding the backbone of Wall Street. And everything would have to be new. All the compliance engine technology would be proprietary, brand new, everything, not necessarily proprietary, but brand new. The blockchain architecture, all the other components of a blockchain, the potential virtual machine, scripting language, consensus mechanism, all that stuff. And time was running out because we had to make a decision. And we kind of looked at ourselves in this hot boardroom and had one final question as we looked each other in the eyes. Do we have what it takes to design, build, and deploy a security token blockchain? Drum roll, please. No, we did not. We just realized, back in 2017, the timing wasn't ideal. We were missing a few pieces of the puzzle, namely a lead blockchain architect of world-class caliber with experience doing it before. It was also early. The infrastructure in the security token world wasn't really built yet. It isn't really today either, but especially back then. Also regulatory clarity, that was still very, very early on. And finally, and I think most importantly, it was just time. We didn't want to sit around for 2 years while this blockchain was getting built, and then the market was evolving faster, and then we released something that's outdated already. So we wanted to focus on distribution first. That was our strategy. Therefore, and this is to touch a little bit on Matt's presentation as well, there's a bit of a theme going on here. We chose, out of really convenience, to launch on Ethereum, and it was really a natural choice for us. We have no regrets. We knew the co-founders of Ethereum really well. We were active in the community, and more importantly, Ethereum was live, so we could experiment, we could iterate, we could learn. And we could, most importantly, even beyond that, is we could get distribution first and work backwards. That's always how I've thought about technology. And that is exactly what we did. We are very proud of what we've accomplished. On the main stage last year, right here at Consensus, we actually launched Polymath. Back in those days, there was only a couple security tokens in the wild, and now there's hundreds, so there's like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude in growth. So that's even more than I could have imagined. Polymath, we're very proud of our metrics as well. We played a big part in evangelizing and growing that community internally. But as we continued to scale, we encountered a problem. And looking back, it kind of seems like an inevitable problem or challenge. And that was that Ethereum was never designed for security tokens. And I remember back in the early days, hanging out with Charles in Toronto, when Ethereum was launching, we had these t-shirts that said unstoppable applications. And I loved it. That was the coolest slogan for a new decentralized base layer. But it didn't really translate well to our world, which is regulation-focused, compliance-obsessed security tokens. And it was hard to kind of reconcile those conflicting missions. And to sum it up kind of in one sentence, it's the fact that Ethereum's best features that we all love about it, being immutable, being unstoppable, being permissionless, those are actually bugs when it comes to the world of securities. So the feature is actually a bug. And it gets worse. It turns out that none of today's major blockchains were architected with security tokens in mind. Now, granted, there's a lot of projects claiming they do security tokens now and kind of backing into it casually, but we firmly believe that this is such a challenge and it's dynamic and there's so many components to it. You have to meticulously architect a base layer security token blockchain from the ground up. Oops. So I'll ask the audience if you were to launch a security token or an STO today, what chain would you choose? Shout it out, go ahead. Cardano, yeah, that'd be a good option. But I think the consensus is there's no consensus. There's no obvious choice. Today's top chains, as I said, and this is really what I want to hammer home, they're not natively equipped for the compliance-obsessed world of security tokens, as I see Lowell pontificating in the back. And this actually translates into real practical challenges for tokenized issuers. If a pension fund, for example, if they lose their private keys, grandma can't retire. And that's not a feature, that's a bug, and that's a huge problem. Or let's say you're a tokenized fund, a VC fund, and a bad actor gets his hands on one of your limited partner tokens. How do you take it back? How do you unwind that transaction? These are practical challenges. And even kind of more pressing is just that kind of underpins everything is just identity. And it's not an afterthought. On today's major public chains, it kind of is, and it is by design, because the pseudonymity or anonymity of these chains is a feature, and privacy and all that, but it can't be an afterthought for securities. It has to be baked in natively to the architecture, and that's, I think one of the things that's missing the most. So, the thesis of the presentation, the security tokens of the future will not live on blockchains of the past. I've got my little barbed wire up there, which represents the trench warfare that Polymath has been doing for the last 2 years. Learning, rolling up our sleeves, talking to issuers, talking to all the stakeholders in the community. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to choose to live on a purpose-built, compliance-focused blockchain. So, I'm very excited to announce Polymesh, the new institutional-grade security token blockchain initiative. So why do we need a new base layer? And I want to use an analogy. Everyone remembers the phone line, internet era, when we had to dial up, 56K modems, all that. Do you ever wonder why the internet lived on phone lines? Because I did, and it turns out it was just simple. It was just convenience. Phone lines worked. They were good enough. They got the job done. And they were already, most importantly, they were already deployed. Like, you didn't have to roll new pipes and infrastructure. So what happened next is the internet matured, and a lot of users started demanding better performance, and then eventually phone lines were ripped out and replaced by something purpose-built. So the infrastructure was upgraded to what is fiber, or before that, cable. We see the exact same dynamic playing out in the security token ecosystem. Ethereum was very convenient, and it was amazing as a general purpose platform. But as the users start getting more demanding, and they want certain features and certain functionality and certain performance, they're demanding a purpose-built infrastructure. And this isn't us thinking this is us hearing this from some of the top issuers and banks and regulators that we talk to on a daily basis. Just quickly on this topic, right in New York City, there's a venture fund called Union Square Ventures, and they released this thesis a few years ago. I think Joel Monegro at Placeholder now, that crypto networks are fat protocols. The value accrues down to the base layer, as opposed to, say, the internet, where the value accrues up the stack towards the applications like Uber and Facebook, and the protocol, TCP/IP, HTTP, don't really collect value. But in crypto networks, they do. And we think, no one talks about this, but the security token networks, this applies even more so in our view. And we think that's why it's so important to really get the base layer right, because in our ecosystem, that's where a lot of the value is going to accrue. So what should this new infrastructure look like? On the one hand, you have a private solution like a Hyperledger, and these are great for intercompany transactions, and they're kind of siloed off from the rest of the world by design. So that's door number one. And door number two, you have public, permissionless, decentralized, global chains, like Ethereum, like a Bitcoin. But the problem with that is, at least in our experience, the stakeholders aren't really comfortable with that. The top issuers and regulators we talk to don't really feel comfortable in any circumstance having that as the base layer. So what can we do about this? Is this a binary choice? We don't think so. We think this is actually a false dichotomy, and there's another solution that we really want to press on. We are working on, among many other things, but one of the things I'd like to share today is a private-public hybrid architecture for security tokens. We think the issuers of tomorrow are going to demand the best of both worlds. They're going to want this open source, tamper-proof public ledger to settle transactions. That's what they're good for. And they're also going to want functionality of a private chain as well. The ability to iterate and talk to regulators, the ability to grant certain access and permissions to stakeholders in the ecosystem. So that's our thesis here, is that it's a hybrid solution that's going to win out. I want to talk about adoption, seeding the chain. I think one of the biggest advantages we have at Polymath is that we did distribution first, and we're sitting on over 100 security tokens that have launched on our layer 2 dApp. And my biggest concern, this is what scares me, is releasing something and then just having a graveyard or just tumbleweeds rolling and no one using it. So I think this is our biggest advantages, and one of the reasons we could potentially make this chain one of the fastest adopted ever, because we already have the traction first. And we're not stopping there. We're making the case not just to our own issuers, but issuers on all other chains, on Ethereum, security token issuers, that is, that there is another way. You can upgrade seamlessly to Polymesh when we're live. But those two growth channels aren't actually what I'm most excited about. It's the third ring at the top. This is non-existent future security tokens that don't exist yet. That's where we see the needle really getting moved, the big exponential growth. We always talk about this coming stampede of security tokens, and we believe in this now more than ever. And that's exactly who we're building this blockchain for. Now I have a confession to make. We have a lot of work to do. And one of the reasons we're here sharing this is to engage the community, and we need help. And some of the topics we like jamming on are issues like governance. That's always a fun one. Native identity, regulation technology, all these things. If this is an interest of yours, we'd love to enlist your help in building this blockchain together. Tomorrow, we are very excited to be hosting Polymath Connect. We have about 1,000 people who have signed up for this. It's just happening around the corner at the Atrium. It's right outside the Remy restaurant. And we got all kinds of great treats and special guests and workshops and panels. I would really appreciate it if you guys could sign up on that link there. You obviously can't click it, but that's where to sign up. And before we kind of sell out, it'd be great for you guys to come and check it out. You can also submit your questions about specifics on what we're doing that we can answer live. So thank you for hearing me out, and again, Nolan and Ryan and everybody. But before I go, there's one more thing that's kind of been lingering in my head a little bit. You might be asking, why did you change your mind? Like you said, you're not ready for security token, so what's changed since then? It hasn't been that long. And I think a lot has changed. I mean, we've scaled our knowledge base, we've grown our user base, our brand, our team internally has grown 10x. But I'm going to be brutally honest, I don't know if that's enough. I think this is such an important, ambitious project that there's an X factor that we need to help pull this off. And that's why I would like to share the worst kept secret here. But a very dear friend of mine, I'd like to call to the stage. He is a globe-trotting, cowboy boot-wearing, falcon training, what else? Co-founder of two of the biggest crypto projects out there, and most important, Ethereum and the up-and-coming Cardano, which is, those two projects are changing the world. And I am proud to call him a co-author and co-architect of the Polymesh blockchain. Please give it up. You know who it is, Charles Hoskinson. Are we going to get some chairs?
No, this is the mic for outdoor cameras. Oh, okay. Yeah, they didn't mic me up back there. Hey, can you guys hear me? So Trevor doesn't know this, but I actually got him a gift. So I was trying to imagine, like, if Polymesh was a gummy, what type of gummy would it be? So here you
Can
go.
I open it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have no choice. I have to take a selfie.
And the
of
density of that thing is amazing. It's like really heavy. 5 pounds of gummy. Don't eat it all in one sitting. You'll die. Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing? You doing good? It's Consensus. It's the big event. 3 years running, they've never invited me to speak, but they got me here.
Charles.
Oh, yeah, we got to get the gummy shot.
Priorities first.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So you're supposed to ask me some questions, or how's this working?
Yeah, look, I just want to thank you for coming up on stage. And when we met 3 years ago,
Yeah,
back
it's been a long time, man. I know, it was longer than 3 years, like 5 years, 2014.
Simpler times, huh?
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
The good old days.
That's all we could afford back in the day.
We were all, living in our parents' basements, But listen, I want to cut to the chase here because this is a very serious project. And I guess first of all, like, you're a busy guy. Yes, we have a relationship before, but why security tokens? Why now? And why, work with us to do this?
So I've been to over 52 countries, and we talk a lot to developing world countries. So I just got back from Mongolia. We met with the president, the U.S. ambassador to Mongolia, the Financial Regulatory Commission, and one of the biggest topics that came up is how do we get liquidity for our small to mid-sized businesses, and how do we get liquidity for our natural resources and for our real estate? And the problem is that they have very small, sort of regulated securities markets. And so when we look at STOs, that's really a solution for them. And it's a solution for Ethiopia, and it's a solution for a lot of the jurisdictions we do business in. So if you're going to be competitive in this space, and you're really going to take this space to the next level, you have to look at where security tokens are going to be. And what makes Polymath really special is you guys are the market standard at the moment. 126 issued. A huge amount of organizational knowledge is in the Polymath team, and you guys have direct access to regulators, policymakers, investment banks, and others who are going to be ultimately the customers and the issuers that will carry this space forward. Mm-hmm. So it made a lot of sense to work with you guys.
Why does Polymesh need to exist? I mean, you're a co-founder of Ethereum. It's a dynamic platform. Why can't we just launch securities on Ethereum forever?
So the thing about Ethereum is that it's a general purpose piece of infrastructure. So the point of general purpose infrastructure is it gives you the ability to build something any way you want, but it doesn't change itself for any one application. You can't go to Intel and say, redesign your chips for my video game, for example. So the point of going to particular purpose, special purpose, is that you can custom tailor the design of the system for the business domain. And in that process, you make it more secure, you make it faster, and also you have more degrees of freedom to change the system when regulators demand it. There's hundreds of standards that exist for all different types of assets, and you're not going to be able to go into the Ethereum community and say, let's put reversibility, or let's do this or that, or this identity standard. Even if you want to, look how long it's taken Bitcoin to go through its upgrade cycle. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, these other standards really aren't well suited for the demands and needs of the security industry. So you really need something special, and you need a special architecture to accommodate that.
You built and helped architect Ethereum and innovate on a lot of things. Thank you for that. And Cardano as well. Do you think that a security token layer 1 blockchain could be as big and as important as your two previous acts of work on your impressive resume?
Well, it is a big gummy. But no, I mean, all things in their purpose and their place. And as the markets mature and evolve, the problem with all cryptocurrencies right now is they're generally homogeneous systems. What that means is everyone has the same user experience and everyone's treated equally. And that makes a lot of sense from an egalitarian viewpoint, but it's not how the world works, especially when you're talking about regulated markets. You have broker-dealers, you have MSBs, you have non-bank financial institutions, you have exchanges, you have all of these people floating around. And they have licenses and special roles. So then what you're doing is saying to them, oh, you're going to come in and have the same place within our system as grandma. And in many cases, that means the system is going to work against the people if you put them into that framework. So the point about building something custom purpose, special purpose, is that you really can get into the nuts and bolts of what each of these roles need, and then you can talk about innovation. The magic of STOs and the magic of security tokens is that you can put the regulation into the transaction, you can put the compliance into the transaction, the identity into the transaction, all kinds of really sophisticated business logic. And then you can have bespoke standards for different jurisdictions, whether that be China or Malta or that be the United States. And that all is going to scale and be templated. So I think that's huge because these markets are huge. They're in the trillions of dollars. And that's just in the developed world for the people who can trade. But then when you look at the real estate market, like Hernando de Soto Pilar, it's trillions of dollars in the developing world, inaccessible. Where we're at in Ethiopia, they don't actually have a stock market. They've been talking about building one for over 20 years. They may get one next year. But when they do, one of the fastest growing economies in the world, 106 million people, 70% at or under the age of 30, are going to need access to some way to securitize their business. That's not going to be through Goldman Sachs or a traditional American-style IPO. It has to be something far more agile. And if you have the right architecture, the right tools, and you guys are on a great path with Polymath, I think it could definitely be something like Polymesh.
Can you talk a little bit deeper about some of the specifics, features and functionality of this blockchain that you think should be done kind of natively, baked right into the architecture itself?
Yeah, so one idea that we've been thinking a lot about is something called multi-ledger asset control. So the basic idea is that before you move a transaction from one party to another party, this is not just an event that Charles decides to push to Bob or Alice decides to push to Bob. There's really multiple stakeholders who are involved in this. So you really need to have some way of reconciling how are we going to record the identity? How are we going to record the metadata? How are we going to create an audit trail? But do this in a way that you can still preserve privacy and you can still have a global open system. So it makes a lot of sense to explore a public-private style blockchain architecture where you have certain side chains of a system that record the identity, the metadata, and they carry the audit trail, and they ordinarily stay private except for the needs of the particular regulator, and you can spin up multiple instances of those based upon the jurisdictions you live in and those particular regulations, and then you have an open system that you can move assets into and then trade those assets, move those assets around. So that's kind of the architecture we've been discussing, but it's early days and there's a lot to do, there's a lot to think about. And the great part about this is this is not a journey that just Polymath is on. It's an industry-wide journey, and there's 126 issuers on the platform. There's regulators all across the world, and they provide tremendous business requirements, tremendous technical advice on where to go. The other point is that it's a lot easier to build a blockchain today than it was just 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you had to do everything. Now we have Parity Substrate and Atala and Fabric and all these other great turnkey platforms, which means you can rapidly prototype and rapidly innovate and bring something, MVP, to the customer as quickly as possible, and then get better feedback to take it to the next level.
Seeing you in action has been a really fun learning experience for me, because when Charles is zoned in and we're sitting in boardrooms together and we're collaborating, he just lays everything out. He said, this is the open source project you need to look at. This is the team that you need to look at to help build this specific component. Everything about the way you kind of manage the process has been amazing for me. How has it been kind of working with us so far with the Polymath team?
I like your team. It's a great team dynamic. You have cynics, you have optimists, you have some people in between. People say it's not going to work, people say it is going to work, and what unifies them is their passion and technical skills and excitement about innovating. I mean, this is actually probably one of the hardest spaces to innovate in, and it's a very frustrating space to innovate in, because even if you get the technology right, you oftentimes have to find a way to work around or work with regulation. And you're not just working with one set of regulation, you're working with sets of regulations all across the world. In some cases, they're contradictory to each other. So you have to kind of pick and choose. And so you need an interdisciplinary team that has both legal skill, practical business skills, as well as technological acumen. And what's nice is Polymath has assembled that, and it's really a joy to work with them. It's been a lot of fun being in those sessions.
One thing you're well known for is just getting on a plane, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, meeting people all over the world. And that global first outlook, I think, and we think at Polymath, is so important for building a security token blockchain. But it's a huge challenge, and you touched on that. Every regulation in and of itself is complicated and gray and debatable. And then when you start adding other jurisdictions and interfacing them together, it's a major legal and technical challenge. Can you talk a little bit more about how you think of this and how your background is kind of uniquely qualifies you to think about this?
Well, IOHK runs in almost 20 countries now. It's up from 16. We have about 200 people. The HR law alone is pretty difficult, but the key is that you have to run your business like you run your protocols, and ultimately we're a decentralized business. And so when we look at these problems, these challenges, there is currently a big global demand for transnational standards. And the way that used to be done is somebody won the big war, whether it be the United States or Russia or empires past, and then they earned the right for 50 to 100 years to define how the world worked. The standards, how we keep time, the units of measurement, all of these things came from whatever empire happened to be running things. Now the 21st century is really the first century where we're talking about this idea of a headless confederation of standards in the world. So it's no longer the case that somebody wins and then that's what we go with. It's now the case that society basically self-assembles solutions. And that's done not at the government level, but almost always at the private level. So what's really exciting about it is when you take that trend and you combine it with some of the things we're doing in the cryptocurrency space, especially in the security space, I think we can finally solve things like cross-border security settlement. And we can finally solve things like automation of KYC and AML and automation of compliance, so that future generations of small businesses that want to do business all across the world, they don't have to hire armies of lawyers and they don't have to hire legions of accountants. They just use templates and libraries, just like software developers do today. And that's really I think the magic of this space and what we're bringing to bear. So it's a long road, it takes a long time, you have setbacks here and there, but you look at the team, you look at the market, you look at the momentum, and you look at the passion, and it's really exciting to be involved in this.
Well, I have nothing more to add to that, Charles. Thank you so much for the gummy bear especially.
Yeah, don't eat it all in one place, it'll kill you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes.